The man who moved in upstairs didn't bring much. Just a single duffel bag, a rust-colored rug rolled under one arm, and a narrow, antique mirror strapped awkwardly to his back like a coffin lid. He arrived just past midnight, no moving van, no friends to help him, and didn't knock on the landlord's door for keys. I only noticed him because of the sound, an off-tempo tapping on the floorboards that made my ceiling groan in slow, deliberate rhythms. Tap, tap, tap tap. Like someone pacing barefoot in the dark, counting steps not for distance, but for ritual. At first, I thought it was my imagination. The unit above mine had been vacant for over a year, a sagging, dust-choked hovel sealed up tight after the last tenant vanished during winter. No one had said anything about a new renter. But the smell started the next day. Not rot. Not mildew. Something sharper, more metallic. It would rise from the walls around 3 a.m. exactly, waking me like a slap. I started sleeping with socks stuffed under the bedroom door. On the third night, I heard him speak. No, not speak. Murmur. Chant, maybe. His voice vibrated low, like it had too many chords in his throat. It bled through the vents in a hoarse, rhythmic loop, accompanied by the scrape of furniture being dragged or something heavier. I knocked on the ceiling once. It stopped for 2 whole minutes. Then I heard 3 knocks in return. But the worst part wasn't the noise. Or the smell. Or even the stains that began to bloom across my ceiling like bruises. It was that every night, just before I fell asleep, I'd hear my own name whispered from somewhere above, as though the man had been waiting all day to practice it, shaping it slowly, syllable by syllable, like a spell. You said he arrived on a Thursday, just as the sun was dipping behind the skeletal trees at the edge of the property line. The kind of dusky, half-lit hour that makes everything feel a little quieter than it should. I noticed him from my living room window, a tall figure, thin but not fragile, dragging a duffel bag across the gravel path with one hand and cradling a rolled-up rug beneath the other. Slung across his back was a long, narrow mirror, its frame wrapped in what looked like rotting bedsheets tied with baling twine. No truck, no boxes, no movers. Just him. That mirror. And the bag that thumped against the ground like it was full of bricks. I didn't see a key exchange, no meet and greet with the landlord, nothing like that. He just walked around to the side of the duplex, climbed the warped staircase to the upper unit, and vanished behind the peeling door with the rusted-out bee barely hanging on by a screw. That apartment had been empty since the last tenant moved out or disappeared, depending on which version of the story you believed. A young guy, early 20s. One day, he was there. The next, nothing but silence and the strange rotted smell that lingered for a week. The landlord chalked it up to personal issues and refused to elaborate, just scrubbed the place out and kept it boarded up for months. I didn't expect anyone to move in, especially not without notice. But the man settled in like he'd always belonged. I never saw a single light turn on upstairs, even after nightfall. No television flicker, no lamplight, just darkness, thick and heavy, pooling in the windows like ink. And he didn't make a sound during the day. It was only after midnight that I heard movement, slow creaks of the floorboards, the dragging scuff of feet, the occasional sharp thud, as if something heavy had been dropped deliberately. It wasn't the kind of noise that suggested clumsiness. It was too intentional. Like he was rearranging things in specific patterns, or pacing by memory. What disturbed me most was the rhythm. Not the sounds themselves, but how they repeated. Sometimes it was a pattern of 3 soft taps, followed by a long silence, then 3 more again and again, like he was waiting for something in between. Other times, it was a dragging noise that circled the perimeter of the ceiling above me, moving clockwise, always clockwise, stopping for long stretches near the corner of my bedroom. I tried to convince myself it was just a weird habit, maybe insomnia or nervous energy. But then I noticed something. The sounds only ever started after I turned out my lights. It started small, just a faint discoloration on the ceiling above my bed. At first, I thought it was the usual mold creeping back through the cracks in the plaster, a relic of the building's age. But as the days wore on, it grew darker, more pronounced, a murky brown streak that bled outward in uneven patterns, almost like it was spreading. It didn't make sense. The apartment upstairs had been vacant for so long that the plumbing should have been turned off, and there hadn't been any rain to cause a leak. Yet, The dark stain continued to expand, inch by inch, in irregular, jagged lines. The air in my apartment grew thicker, too, as if something invisible was pressing down from above. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of something heavy hanging in the stillness. Every time I passed the hallway where the stain was most prominent, I'd catch a faint smell, metallic, almost like copper, but mixed with the sour, pungent scent of damp earth. It made my stomach twist. I tried to ignore it at first, told myself I was just being paranoid. But then one morning, I woke up to something new. Water. Cold water, dripping steadily from the ceiling, falling in a rhythm that mirrored the noises I'd been hearing from upstairs. I rushed to grab a bowl, positioning it directly beneath the growing puddle, and watched it fill slowly, then quickly, as if the ceiling was leaking from a pipe that shouldn't have even been there. I called the landlord, but he seemed unconcerned, his voice flat and dismissive. "The unit upstairs doesn't have water running yet," he told me. "That's impossible." I could hear the irritation in his tone, as though he was already tired of my complaints. He told me to put a bucket under the drip and he'd have someone come by to fix it when he had time. But the water kept coming, relentless, thick and tar-like, until the bowl overflowed and the carpet around the base of the walls was soaked. I tried to reason with myself, to chalk it up to some freak occurrence in the old pipes. But the more I examined the stain and the strange drip, the more I felt the chill of unease crawl through my chest. The water wasn't just water. It was wrong. Darker than it should have been. Thicker. Something was seeping through the ceiling, something that didn't belong in the building. And every night after it started, the tapping from upstairs would return, louder, faster, as if whatever was up there was moving more urgently, dragging something heavier along the floor. The water, the noises, the smell, they were all becoming part of the same thing. The same presence. The baby monitor was supposed to help me figure out what was going on. I'd seen the old, static-filled devices in second-hand stores for years, but I had no idea why I thought this particular one would make a difference. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe I just needed some sort of proof that what I was hearing wasn't just my imagination running wild. The sounds from upstairs had only grown more disturbing. The pacing, the dragging, the low murmuring, it all continued without end, and I felt like I was losing grip on what was real. So, I placed the monitor on the floor of my bedroom, switched it on, and aimed the receiver at the ceiling, hoping it might pick up something useful. Something tangible. At first, there was only static. White noise that crackled and hissed, filling the empty air like an unwelcome presence. I waited for what felt like hours, straining my ears for any clue that could make sense of the disorienting sounds. Then, right around midnight, a voice broke through the static, guttural, low, and almost incomprehensible. It sounded like a chant, a language I didn't recognize, rasping in and out like someone was speaking through thick cloth. The words were garbled, the rhythm too deliberate to be random. It was as though whatever was on the other side of the wall was repeating something over and over, like it was rehearsing, trying to perfect it. I leaned closer to the monitor, my heart racing. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was something ancient, something wrong. It was the kind of voice you hear in a nightmare, the kind that vibrates in your bones. It didn't sound like the man from upstairs. This voice was deeper, more distorted, as though it was coming from a different place altogether. The man upstairs, if he was even human, was gone from the equation now. What I was hearing wasn't just a person anymore. I turned up the volume, hoping it would help me catch more of what was being said. That's when I heard it, faint, almost imperceptible, but undeniably there. Another voice. A second whisper, layered beneath the first, speaking in a language that made my skin crawl. It wasn't human. Not even close. It wasn't just distorted, it was primal, like something that had never been spoken by a living creature. It spoke in short bursts, punctuated by deep, unsettling pauses, as if whatever was up there was waiting. Waiting for something. I stared at the monitor in horror. The voices, the murmurs, the unnatural cadence, it was no longer a question of what was happening. It was a matter of how long before it all reached me. The neighborhood had always been quiet, too quiet sometimes. The kind of place where the trees grew heavy and the air stayed thick with the smell of damp wood. I hadn't noticed anything out of the ordinary at first when the animals started to disappear, But after a while, it became impossible to ignore. It wasn't just the usual handful of squirrels or the occasional stray cat. No, these were the ones you'd see every day. The fox that would saunter down the lane in the early morning, its fur a rich auburn against the backdrop of the dirt roads. The rabbits that lived in the tangled bramble by the old fence. Even the raccoons, who always seemed to be rooting through the trash bins in the dead of night, were gone. At first, it was just one or two. A missing squirrel here, a fox gone without a trace there. I figured maybe it was the change of seasons, or predators moving in. But as the weeks passed, the disappearances grew more frequent, and the unease started to gnaw at me. The animals didn't just vanish, they seemed to evaporate. No tracks. No signs of struggle. Not even the faintest disturbance in the leaves or dirt. Just gone. One morning, as I walked to the mailbox, I spotted something that made my stomach twist. A fox, or what was left of one, hanging by its neck from the doorframe of the building. Its body was limp, its eyes wide and empty, staring directly at me. The sight made my skin crawl, but what really horrified me was what I found when I looked closer. The fox wasn't just dead. It had been nailed to the wood with something sharp, its fur matted with a strange, dark liquid that glistened in the morning light. Someone had marked it, as if the animal itself were a message.